morning, Asia. Good evening, America. You're watching World DNA with me, Raisha Saigal.
And I'm Hem Korsara, and on the show today, Israel has warned Hezbollah of an all-out war after the Lebanese group published a 9-minute video showing Israeli military and civilian locations in several Israeli cities. The publication of this video comes after months of intensifying cross-border attacks between Hezbollah and Israel. Issuing a warning, Israel has said that Hezbollah will be destroyed and that Lebanon will be hit hard. What will be the implications of this? How will things pan out going forward? That is something we'll discuss on the show today.
Of course, Hem. Also on World DNA, Russian President Vladimir Putin has landed in North Korea for a 2-day summit. This is Putin's first visit to North Korea in 24 years and demonstrates invincibility and durability of unity between North Korea and Russia as anti-West alignment deepens. The question being, how will the West view this visit and how will it impact the global world order? We'll of course be tracking that on the show today, but first, a quick check on the headlines.
Kim Jong-un welcomes Russian President Vladimir Putin in North Korea, a visit likely to reshape decades of Russia and North Korea ties as both countries face international isolation.
US President Joe Biden attempts a political high-wire act, announces a citizenship pathway for 500,000 immigrants married to US nationals in a counterweight to his recent crackdown on illegal border crossers.
The Israeli army says plans for an offensive in Lebanon were approved and validated amid escalating cross-border clashes with the Hezbollah.
American forces destroy 8 drones belonging to the Houthis in Yemen over the past 24 hours. Houthis have been targeting vessels in the Red Sea and Gulf of Aden since November 2023 in support with the Palestinians.
Delegation of US lawmakers, including the former House Speaker Nancy Pelosi, to meet the Dalai Lama in Dharamsala today. This as China urges Biden not to sign the Tibet bill.
Extreme heat grips US, triggering alerts for 75 million Americans in the Midwest and Northeast.
Residents in parts of northern and northwestern India struggle to survive in a prolonged and persistent heat wave. National capital Delhi faces severe water shortage as power demand sees record peaks.
Nvidia dethrones Microsoft to become the world's most valuable company on Tuesday. Gains over $100 billion in one single day. AI demand adds $2 trillion in company's market value in just 1 year.
Cristiano Ronaldo struggles for Portugal, but the 2016 champions still beat the Czech Republic in their Euro 2024 opener, courtesy of an injury-time winner in Leipzig. Now, Russian President Vladimir Putin and North Korean leader Kim Jong-un agreed to bolster ties between the two countries. Putin is on a visit to North Korea, first time in 24 years.
Right, Hem. This is the second meeting between the two leaders since September, and experts say it is largely driven by Russia's need for weapons as its war with Ukraine continues. North Korea says that the meeting between the two leaders demonstrates invincibility and durability of friendship and unity. Pyongyang called the country's partnership an engine for accelerating the building of a new multipolar world. The Pentagon voiced concerns about the growing ties between Moscow and Pyongyang.
The deepening cooperation between Russia and the DPRK is something that should be of concern, especially to anyone that's interested in maintaining peace and stability on the Korean Peninsula, but also supporting the people of Ukraine as they continue to fight against Russian aggression.
Now, on the other hand, NATO underscored that Russia's war in Ukraine was being propped up by North Korea along with China and Iran. NATO Chief Stoltenberg said that the countries together wanted to see the Western alliance fail. Also, Stoltenberg warned against the potential support that Russia provides to North Korea when it comes to the missiles and nuclear programs.
Meanwhile, Wednesday's agenda includes one-on-one discussions between Putin and Kim Jong-un, a gala concert, state reception, honor guards, document signing, and a statement to the media.
All right, to discuss things further, we're now being joined by Professor Peter Kuznick, Professor of History and Director of Nuclear Studies Institute at American University. Sir, thank you so much for joining us on World DNA.
Glad to be with you.
Sir, of course, North Korea and Russia are both heavily sanctioned by the West. In recent times, they've vowed strong ties. Anti-West alignment, that is something that is deepening here. This has raised, and the United States has raised alarm over the same as well. How do you think the West views this visit, and what are the challenges that it perceives?
Well, clearly, in the context of what's happening internationally now, this visit is very, very significant. We've seen a series of meetings recently. There was the so-called Peace Summit in Switzerland, and that was a failure. 160 countries were invited, only 98 attended, and of those 98, 20, including India, refused to sign the communique at the end of the summit. So that didn't achieve anything. There was a meeting of the G7 that just took place in Italy, and that was also a lot of show and symbolism, but didn't really achieve very much. You have leaders there, almost all of whom are very, very weak, some of whom are on the way out and face serious challenges. Then you had NATO meetings in which they talked about increasing the number of deployed nuclear warheads. So this is all going on at the time that the situation in Ukraine is getting more and more intense, especially with the new levels of weaponry going in there, and then the authorization by the U.S. and others that Ukraine can use some of their weapons to strike inside of Russia. So the tensions are heightening, and North Korea has been providing Russia with very significant military aid. Russia already is outproducing NATO when it comes to artillery, and the Russians are deploying many times as much artillery, but the South Koreans estimate that North Korea provided 5 million artillery shells last year. And so that Putin wants that military aid. He wants the intercontinental ballistic missiles, and North Korea wants a lot of Russian military technological know-how, as well as Russian wheat exports. So it's a kind of symbiotic relationship at a time when neither country has got a lot of allies on the world scene, but the United States influence is not what it used to be either. And so we've got the global South resisting the United States and growing ties between Russia, China, North Korea, and Iran.
Right. Mr. Kuznick, you very well covered all the parameters here of the ties between North Korea and Russia. And like you mentioned, North Korea is providing military aid to Russia, according to reports. In return, in exchange, Putin will help Kim with spy satellites, like you mentioned. How do you assess this transactional relationship, or can we say friendship, between Moscow and Pyongyang at this point of time? And what perhaps can the West do to stop all of this, with most of the missiles and weapons going via train?
Russia has been instrumental in supporting United Nations efforts to sanction North Korea in the past. But beginning in March, Russia vetoed a very important United Nations mission to look into the sanctions about North Korea's military policies and their missile tests. And so without Russia's support, the United Nations is going to be greatly weakened in that regard. So what we're seeing now is very, very dangerous, in my opinion. We're seeing greater and greater polarization. Russia gets much closer to China, to North Korea, to Iran, and others. And while the United States, which used to be able to call the shots internationally, is in an increasingly weakened position, with the possibility, frightening as it is to me, that Donald Trump might be the next president. And if that happens, then America's alliances, not only NATO, but with the Europeans and America's support for Ukraine, could certainly be or ended. So there's a lot of moving parts right now, and a lot of uncertainty. And rather than move toward a multipolar world, we're going toward a bipolar world, which is not the same thing.
Right, sir. In fact, absolutely. I wanted better understanding on this, coming back to a point that you made earlier. Now, I want to understand, what does this visit mean for Ukraine? As you mentioned, this comes after a failed Swiss peace conference, of course, the G7 summit, which saw no concrete results either. Do you think this visit is a chance for Russia to perhaps show that it's not isolated anymore?
Well, we know that the Western sanctions against Russia have not worked, partly because China and India have been buying up Russian oil that the Europeans used to get, which is hurting the European economies because they're paying more for their oil. So the growth rate in Europe is lower than the growth rate in Russia right now. So we see that happening. In terms of Ukraine, Russia already is gaining the advantage on the battlefield. Since they opened up the new front in northeast around Kharkiv, Ukraine has had to move a lot of its troops from the south and the east. And especially in the east, Russia's been able to make more and more slow incremental gains. There are more weapon systems coming into Ukraine, including F-16s, and that might help Ukraine, but that's the fantasy, is that somehow Ukraine is going to be able to turn the tide of the war. I don't see it happening. Russia is just too strong. They've got too much armaments, and they've got too big a population. And so the fear that everybody has right now is we're moving closer and closer to a military confrontation between Russia and NATO, or Russia and China and NATO, which could mean World War III. We need diplomacy. As Guterres and others have been saying, this fighting is not going to solve anything. We need to sit down and start talking.
All right. Well, Professor Kuznick, thank you so much for joining us on World DNA with your insights on this.
Thank you for having me.
Moving on, the Hezbollah offensive on Israel from Lebanon that has gone on for months now, that has become more intense.
Right. Lebanon's Iran-backed group Hezbollah has published a video. It claims it is from one of its reconnaissance drones flying over northern Israel, including the Haifa port.
Reports say Hezbollah has been launching drones across the northern Israel border on a daily basis, many of them laden with explosives. And this video seems to suggest a message put out to Israel that Hezbollah has eye on Israel and access to most of its security installations. The militant group indicated that the video was only the first episode of more to come, highlighting that the drones bypassed Israeli air defenses and returned to Lebanese airspace without being detected, where there's still no comment from the IDF as of yet.
But amid the escalating cross-border clashes with Hezbollah, the Israeli army says its plans for an offensive in Lebanon have been approved and validated. The statement comes after Israeli Foreign Minister Israel Katz earlier warned and threatened Hezbollah that it would be destroyed in the event of a total war between the two.
Even as Israel's ally, the US tries to avert any escalation in the region, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is claiming that the US is withholding weapons needed for the war in Gaza. Netanyahu implied the holdup was slowing Israel's offensive in the southern Gaza city of Rafah.
When Secretary Blinken was recently here in Israel, we had a candid conversation. I said it's inconceivable that in the past few months, the administration has been withholding weapons and ammunition to Israel. Israel, America's closest ally, fighting for its life, fighting against Iran and our other common enemies.
Now reacting to claims by Israeli Prime Minister, US Secretary of State Antony Blinken said that 2,000-pound bombs are the only weapons under review. Otherwise, everything else is moving as it normally does.
We have one case that the President's talked about publicly, about the 2,000-pound bombs and concerns that we have about them being used in densely populated areas. That remains. We continue to work through that, but there's been no change in our posture, which our posture is, again, to make sure that Israel has what it needs to defend itself across these many threats.
The American forces also continue to safeguard the Red Sea trade route from the Houthis. The US military says over the past 24 hours, its forces have destroyed 8 drones belonging to Yemen's Houthis.
And pressure is intensifying against Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu with calls for owning up responsibility on inaction in preventing the October 7th Hamas attacks.
Right, Haim. Now, on Tuesday, hundreds of people arrived to demonstrate against Netanyahu's presence at the Nahal Yetzar cemetery in Tel Aviv for a ceremony for the fallen of the incident in 1948. They called out, "You're the leader and you are guilty."
The protest came on a day when the Israeli media reported that Israel's intelligence bureaus and defense forces had prior knowledge of the October 7th attack. A document compiled by the Israeli military's Gaza division was reportedly made available to top intelligence officials, warning of the October attack 3 weeks before it took place.
Every day you wake up in the morning, you read the news about soldiers that died in combat, and there's no future. We don't get any results. The hostages are there for more than 8 months now, and we don't do anything basically to bring them. I have friends and relatives who died in October 7th and after that as well. And I don't see how it's changing unless Bibi Netanyahu is going and leaving this place.
Thousands of people held a demonstration in Jerusalem for a second day on Tuesday, calling for fresh elections and an end to the war in Gaza.
Many Israelis anguished over the hostages still held in Gaza and the ongoing war accused Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu of putting political interests ahead of all else.
We have to have leadership that thinks not only about herself, but first and foremost about the people of this country and about the good of this country.
The demonstrations were part of the second day of what has been branded a week of disruption by various protest groups. Netanyahu has said time and again that elections should not take place while the war in Gaza is still going on. The next general elections in Israel are formally scheduled to be in October 2026.
On Monday, Netanyahu disbanded his war cabinet, a move that consolidates his influence over the Israel-Hamas war. The protesters also fear that it diminishes the odds of a ceasefire in the Gaza Strip anytime soon.
Moving on, immigration seems to be the hot topic leading the debates following the 2024 U.S. presidential elections in the United States of America.
Now, both the nominees, the incumbent Joe Biden and former U.S. President Donald Trump, held alternative views, and now Biden has announced citizenship of hundreds of immigrants without legal status in the United States.
Well, the aim behind the action is to balance his recent crackdown on the southern border, which angered various Democratic lawmakers. Biden announced that his administration in the coming months will allow certain U.S. citizens' spouses without legal status to apply for a permanent residency, and with time, without having to first depart the country.
The second action I'm announcing today was about keeping families together, about keeping couples together who are married, where one spouse is a U.S. citizen, the other is undocumented. They've been living in the United States for at least 10 years. These couples have been raising families, people are affected today, but living in the United States all this time with fear and uncertainty. We can fix that, and that's what I'm going to do today. Fix it.
Biden's action amounts to most expansive federal protection for migrants in over a decade. It also sets up a significant political contrast with presumptive GOP presidential nominee Donald Trump, whose hardline stance on mass deportations includes rhetoric casting migrants as dangerous criminals.
As per officials, the new Biden program will be open to an estimated 500,000 spouses who have lived in the U.S. for at least 10 years as of June 17th. As for the new rules, some 50,000 children under the age of 21 with a U.S. citizen parent will also be eligible.
And for more on this, our correspondent Susan Tehrani has sent us this report from New York. Listen to this.
President Biden has announced a new policy allowing certain undocumented immigrants, specifically spouses and children of U.S. citizens who are here illegally, to apply for permanent residency. This move has drawn criticism from Republicans who argue that it amounts to quote-unquote amnesty and will encourage more illegal immigration. Biden has defended his policy, saying that it strikes a balance between border security and providing legal pathways to citizenships after the executive order that the president signed a while back limiting illegal border crossings. The White House has been assuring progressive Democrats that it will do more for those inside the United States as well. Meanwhile, former President Donald Trump called this new measure mass amnesty. Other Republicans say that President Biden's rhetoric about balancing border security and legal pathways to citizenship is just a smokescreen for his weak enforcement policies. The policy's fate may ultimately be decided in courts, as House Speaker Mike Johnson predicts. Susan Tehrani reporting from New York for WION This Way.
All right, moving on now with President Emmanuel Macron announcing snap elections in under 2 weeks' time. France has been thrown early into campaigning season.
As both the sides of the French Isle prepare for the electoral showdown, opinion polls show that the French far right could not only dethrone Macron but also flip France's foreign policy on various issues like the Ukraine war and the war in West Asia, and also change the fate of Europe. Our next report telling you more.
French politics has been thrown into full campaign mode after President Emmanuel Macron called a snap election. With polls opening on June 30th, the move was a gamble to try catch other parties off guard, with just a few weeks to prepare, and came after Marine Le Pen's national rally trounced Macron's ruling centrist party in European Parliament elections. But how will it all play out, and will Macron's plan pay off? There are 577 constituency contests, one for each seat in the National Assembly. Candidates with an absolute majority of votes in their constituency are elected in the first round, but usually a second round is needed to reach this criteria. To qualify for the runoff, candidates need first round votes amounting to at least 12.5% of registered voters. The top scorer wins the second round. The President will name the Prime Minister, usually from the party with the most seats. For the first time in France's post-war history, opinion polls show the far right could win. Speaking after the snap election announcement, Executive Director of the Centre of Political Sciences at Sciences Po, Anne Muxel, said the strategy from Macron could backfire.
It's a play at risks because he opens the possibility that the extreme right arrives for the first time at the government, and it opens the eventuality to have a cohabitation in France between him, the President of Republic, and the government.
An absolute majority requires at least 289 seats. National Rally could run a minority government if it wins the most seats without reaching that threshold. But 28-year-old party leader Jordan Bardella has said it wanted an absolute majority or would not be able to carry out reforms. Cohabitation, where the government is of a different political stripe from the president, has occurred in 3 periods in French history. The government has most of the power on the domestic front, but the president is the head of the military and wields influence abroad. The division of power on foreign policy is not clear-cut though, and that could be an issue for France's stance on the war in Ukraine or European Union policy. Macron will have to deal with the new parliament for at least a year, then he could call another snap election. He won a second mandate in April 2022 and is president for 3 more years. Neither parliament nor the government can force him out before that.
Well, it's now time for a quick short break.
Right. Don't go anywhere. Lots lined up for you on the other side as well. Nancy Pelosi, along with an accompanying US delegation, are preparing to meet the Tibetan spiritual leader, the Dalai Lama, in the Indian city of Dharamsala today. We'll get you all the updates on this on the other side.
Also on the other side, Nvidia dethrones Microsoft to become the world's most valuable company. This after AI demands added $2 trillion to the company's market value in just over a year. We'll get the full report on the other side of this short break. Stay tuned. You're watching WION The World.
Namaste. Hello friends. We did Dr. Subhash Chandra show, popularly known as DSC show, for 4 years, from August 2014 to August 2018. 28 states of Bharat. Of course, we reached out to all of you in 190 countries across the world. The show was very successful. Each episode was being watched by almost 25 million people every week. For past 6 years, the demand of the show has never died down. People write to us, people ask for the show to start again. Hence, we are beginning the show once again on All Z Network, also on WION, which is the global network channel from India. Again, thank you for your love and affection. See you soon at Subhash Chandra Show.
From the bustling trading floors of Wall Street to the vibrant exchanges of Asian stock markets, WION breaks it down for you to make sense of what's happening, as we reveal the key factors behind events, strategic battles, and the game-changing business decisions that shape the world. We bring you all of this and more on World Business Watch.
staying with us. You're watching WION World is One with me, Raisha and Haim. There's lots lined up on the other side of World DNA, but first a quick check on the headlines.
Kim Jong-un welcomes Russian President Vladimir Putin in North Korea. A visit likely to reshape decades of Russia-North Korea ties as both countries face international isolation.
US President Joe Biden attempts a political high-wire act, announces a citizenship pathway for 500,000 immigrants married to US nationals in a counterweight to his recent crackdown on illegal border crossers.
The Israeli army says plans for an offensive in Lebanon were approved and validated amid escalating cross-border clashes with Hezbollah.
American forces destroy 8 drones belonging to the Houthis in Yemen over the past 24 hours. Houthis have been targeting vessels in the Red Sea and Gulf of Aden since November 2023 and support with the Palestinians.
Delegation of US lawmakers, including the former House Speaker Nancy Pelosi, to meet the Dalai Lama in Dharamshala today. This as China urges Biden not to sign the Tibet bill.
Extreme heat grips US, triggering alerts for 75 million Americans in the Midwest and Northeast.
Residents in parts of northern and northwestern India struggle to survive in a prolonged and persistent heat wave. National capital Delhi faces severe water shortage as power demand sees record peak.
Cristiano Ronaldo struggles for Portugal, but the 2016 champions still defeat the Czech Republic in the Euro 2024 opener, courtesy of an injury time winner in Leipzig.
All right, a group of US lawmakers are in India to meet Tibetan spiritual leader, the Dalai Lama.
Right, and with the head of the delegation saying that US President Joe Biden will soon sign a bill that aims to press China to resolve the Tibet dispute.
The American delegation on a 2-day visit to Dharamshala is led by US House Foreign Affairs Committee Chairman Michael McCaul. The delegation of lawmakers includes former House Speaker Nancy Pelosi and prominent congressional members. These are the live shots that we're getting from Dharamshala, India right now. As you can see, celebrations are in full swing as a team of US lawmakers are in Dharamshala right now to meet their spiritual leader, the Dalai Lama.
We can see people there entering the place where the Dalai Lama in a short while from now will be meeting Nancy Pelosi and a delegation of other diplomats from the United States of America.
Now, triggering a strong protest from China, Beijing warned Washington of resolute measures to be initiated by China to firmly defend its sovereignty, security and development interests if the American President Biden signs the new bill into law. Chinese Foreign Ministry spokesperson also urged Biden not to sign the bipartisan Tibet policy bill that was adopted by both the US Senate and the House of Representatives. These are the live visuals that we're getting right now from Dharamshala, and to discuss what the mood is like on ground and of course talk about the meeting that is set to happen maybe in an hour from now. It's around 9 a.m. India time. We have with us our principal diplomatic correspondent, Siddhant Sibal. Siddhant, thank you so much for joining us. What can you tell us of the mood on ground right now?
Well, right now I'm standing at the Dalai Lama temple, and this is the place where the public welcome of the US delegation will take place. Right now the US delegation is meeting His Holiness Dalai Lama. We are expected to get the shots very soon. But let me give you a flavor of what's happening on the ground. This is the place where, of course, the public welcome will take place, and you can see presence of a lot of people and a lot of children as well. But let me show you the exact location where the welcome will take place, and this is the place where the welcome will take place, where the US lawmakers will be present and will be speaking in a public way about their commitments to the Tibetan cause. Now, yesterday we saw they speaking at the Tibetan Parliament in exile, and Nancy Pelosi is present, and she talked about the Resolve Tibet Act, and this is something that is awaiting the signatures of the US President Joe Biden. But all in all, a message of commitment by the US Congress, but also a geopolitical message to Beijing. Of course, China has reacted strongly to the visit of the US lawmakers and have slammed the visit of the US lawmakers, reminding them that how Tibet is part of China and reminding them of the One China policy.
Right, Siddhant, apart from the enthusiasm that we are seeing there at the monastery there in Dharamshala, the meeting is currently underway. Talk to us about how the Chinese Foreign Ministry has clearly said that US should not have any contact with the Dalai group in any form and stop sending the wrong signal to the world.
Well, the Chinese reaction on expected lines. In fact, the Chinese reaction came just few hours after the US delegation landed here in Dharamshala. But no surprises when it comes to the Chinese reaction. They, of course, are not very happy about any kind of engagement with the Tibetan leadership in exile here in India. In the past, in fact, almost 2 months ago, there was a delegation which came from Europe, and there was a strong reaction then also by the Chinese. But essentially what the Americans are doing, it looks like, is to send a message of their commitment, especially the US Congress. And we also know that the His Holiness Dalai Lama will be traveling to US as well. So will there be a meeting between His Holiness and the US President Joe Biden is something that will be closely watched. His birthday is also going to come very soon. Will there be a gift from the American side as well? And how much will it impact the US-China relationship? Because we have seen a nascent recovery in the relationship. We also saw the visit of the Chinese president. But will these developments cast a shadow is something that only time will tell.
All right, well, Siddhant, thank you so much for bringing us the latest. Of course, we'll continue to track all developments there with you there. Thank you so much.
Moving on, now India and the US have seen a steady growth in space sector ties in recent decades, and now India and the US are contemplating human-led lunar exploration. WION principal correspondent Siddhant MP tells us more in our next report. Take a look.
India-US space sector ties go back to the early 1960s. In fact, the first scientific rocket to lift off from India is the US-origin Nike Apache experimental rocket. But US-India space ties saw real progress in the 21st century as India began its own journey of space exploration using indigenous capability. India's Chandrayaan-1 mission, the first Indian mission to reach lunar orbit, carried an American sensor on board. Chandrayaan-1 was also instrumental in establishing the presence of water ice on the moon. Later, Chandrayaan-2 and Chandrayaan-3 missions also carried miniature scientific components provided by the US. However, the major shift in India-US space ties came in June 2023 as PM Modi made a state visit to the US. Back then, President Biden made significant announcements.
They're collaborating on human spaceflight, including sending an Indian astronaut to the International Space Station in 2024.
These high-profile space sector announcements came at a time when India is working towards its homegrown astronaut mission Gaganyaan. As an all-weather friend, Russia had provided training for India's astronauts and will also be providing the space flight suits for India's Gaganyaan astronaut mission. Now the US is also embracing India closely. In June 2023, the US government revealed that NASA would offer advanced training for Indian astronauts at the Johnson Center in Houston, Texas. That's not all. After completing advanced training, the US would also ferry an Indian astronaut to the International Space Station. This mission, targeted for this year, is to happen on a US rocket from US soil. India and the US are looking at ways to perform human-led exploration of the moon. It's too early to say anything, but this is an unprecedented high in America's India embrace. With Siddharth MP in Chennai, Bureau Report, WION World.
All right, shifting our focus now. Nvidia becomes the world's most valuable company, surpassing tech giants Microsoft and Apple.
Nvidia's market capitalization reached $3.33 trillion, driven by 3.2% rise in its stock price. To put that into perspective, the valuation of the tech giant now equals that of India's GDP. Our next report telling you more.
Nvidia became the world's most valuable company on Tuesday on an insatiable demand for its high-end processors. The chipmaker dethroned tech heavyweight Microsoft just days after overtaking iPhone maker Apple. Nvidia stock has surged about 173% so far this year, compared with a rise of about 19% for Microsoft. Demand for Nvidia's chips is outpacing supply. Tech giants Microsoft, Meta Platforms, and Google owner Alphabet are competing to build out their AI computing capabilities. But Nvidia commands more than 80% of the market share for AI chips, making it a major winner from surging AI development. The company also recently split its stock 10-for-1, increasing the appeal among individual investors. It took 9 months for the company's market value to expand from $1 trillion to $2 trillion, which it hit in February. It reached $3 trillion in early June.
Our next report focuses on Israel's booming defense industry. Arms sales have reached a record high, driven by a surge in air defense technology. Take a look.
Israel's defense industry is experiencing a boom, with exports reaching a record-breaking $13 billion in 2023. This marks the third consecutive year sales have broken records, highlighting a trend of significant growth. Air defense systems were the biggest driver of this surge, accounting for 36% of all exports. Geographically, nearly half of Israeli defense exports went to countries in the Asia-Pacific region. While Europe remains a significant customer, this trend suggests growing partnerships with Asian nations. Despite the ongoing conflict in Gaza, Israel's defense exports to its largest customer, India, remain unaffected. However, tensions have arisen elsewhere. The French government recently barred Israeli companies from participating in the Eurosatory Defense Fair, citing the ongoing conflict in Gaza. This decision excluded around 70 Israeli firms from the event, one of the largest defense shows globally. Israeli officials have criticized the move, arguing it undermines efforts against terrorism. On the domestic front, the departure of Benny Gantz from the Israeli government led to the dissolution of the war cabinet responsible for overseeing the Gaza operation. Looking beyond traditional markets, Israel is finding new customers through strategic partnerships. The Abraham Accords countries, which recently normalized relations with Israel, accounted for 3% of defense exports in 2023. This suggests potential for further diversification and market expansion in the coming years. Business Bureau WION World is One.
right, on to all the developments now from the world of technology. The American state of LA is considering banning smartphones at schools, and whether phones should be stored in pouches or lockers during school hours. Moreover, they're also working on provisions for students with learning or physical disabilities. If approved, LA will join a number of US school districts that have banned access to phones or social media. This includes Florida, Oklahoma, Kansas, Vermont, Ohio, Louisiana and Pennsylvania.
Well, the move comes amidst heightened worries regarding the impact of smartphones and social media on children. As per a study, people who owned smartphones when they were young reported poor mental health in adulthood. This includes depression, anxiety, stress and also poor sleep. Experts say that girls in their late teens are most likely to report such behavior. Well, the UN has warned that AI technology is helping create false stories about World War II atrocities. This includes Holocaust denial, risking an explosive spread of anti-Semitism. UNESCO's report highlights instances where hackers rigged chatbots to spread Nazi ideology. In some cases, bots even made up their own stories about the Holocaust. UNESCO has called for governments and tech companies to introduce ethical safeguards around AI technology and also for schools to spread the word about the risks of AI-generated content.
A new study has shown that the global commercial shipping industry can reduce its carbon emissions by 47 million tons each year by using artificial intelligence for sea navigation. The technology could alert crews in real time to avoid high-risk marine targets like vessels, buoys and sea mammals, which can reduce the need for maneuvers and route deviations. Currently, shipping moves about 90% of global trade and contributes nearly 3% to the world's carbon dioxide emissions. This share is expected to rise in the future unless stricter pollution control measures are put in place.
And now to the world of sports. Heavyweights, Portugal needed an injury time winner to defeat Czech Republic and kickstart their European Championship campaign with a victory.
Captain Cristiano Ronaldo broke another record.